Hi, my name is Alyssa Mason. I'm a pediatric occupational therapist. I got my undergrad degree in human development and family studies with a focus in child development, and then worked for many years as an early childhood educator and then as a children's mental health case manager before I went back to school to get my master's degree in occupational therapy with certificates in equity and disability and policy, and equity and diversity. So what I really like about the topic that we're going to go into today is that I can pull from all of my experiences and all of my education to give you guys some tools that will hopefully be helpful right away in your classrooms and that you can use. So we're going to talk about multiple terms today. I'll define them as we go and give kind of a high-level overview of them. But the first thing we're talking about is sensory processing, which is literally just how we process the information that's coming to us all day long. So we are processing sensory information throughout the day, every day. And sometimes it can be difficult to process all that sensory information. And for our little kids especially, it's hard for it to be super clear about if that's what's causing us to be upset, or if that's what's causing us to want to cry or fall on the floor or things like that. So this is where we get to the term of regulation and dysregulation. And these are really closely related to trauma because, as we know, trauma impacts the way that we understand and process and view and experience the world. And so since those sensory things are coming at us all day, it's also going to impact the way that we feel about sensory input and the way that we respond to sensory input. So if you imagine a baby, they come into this world and it's all sensory experiences. We're rocking them, we're bouncing them, we're looking at them, we're singing to them, we're talking to them. All of these things are sensory experiences for them. So if they experience a trauma, it's going to change the way they experience those things and that they make sense of those things. So those will likely have a long-term impact on how we process sensory information, which is why it can sometimes be hard to figure out how to help these little kids who have experienced trauma to calm down. Because those things that we're doing all the time in our classrooms for lots of other kids to help them be calm might not work for this group of kids. So when we talk about that regulation, dysregulation, what we're really looking at is when we're regulated, we're processing all of that sensory input that is coming at us, and we're able to function and do the things that we want and need to do during our day. So for our little kids, that's things like sleeping, eating, playing, building social connections, learning. Those are the things that we want and need them to do through the day. But if they're dysregulated, they're not able to process all those things, and then they're not able to function and do those things that we want them to do. So that's really the difference there. And then when we think about kind of finding that balance again and getting back to regulated, we're thinking about two main ways that we help with that. So one of them is self-regulation. So those are the skills that we have that help ourselves calm down. So when we're looking at regulation, we're looking at across lifespan. We're all doing it all the time. So for me, before I start doing this, maybe I want to stop and take a deep breath, kind of center myself before I go into it so that I'm not too nervous. That's one of my strategies that I use for self-regulation. And I'm sure that you guys all have your own strategies. That's super important, but our littles are going to need a lot of help, which is where we look at co-regulation. And that's where we as caregivers are supporting somebody else, in our case, the kids in our classroom, in calming themselves down and regulating. So that's all those things that you're doing: validating emotions, modeling, teaching strategies, providing different things like snacks or foods or anything like that. All of those things that we're doing to help keep our body kind of at that balanced and regulated state so that the kids can be successful throughout their day. So as we go forward, I'll give you some tools that you can use, some actual demonstrations on strategies for co-regulation that aren't kind of these ones that we all are already doing throughout the day. And one other thing that I want to kind of define or differentiate is tantrums versus dysregulation. This is not an easy topic because it's not black and white where we can just say, here's this checklist, and if they do these three things, then we know it's dysregulation versus a tantrum. It's not that clear. But I do think it's important for us to talk about it and to get at least kind of a concept for it, because it helps us as caregivers to take a step back and think about things differently and have more patience and pause with kids. So tantrums typically are when a kid wants something. So whether that's a change in their schedule, a snack, a toy, attention, whatever it is, they want something. So typically there's going to be somebody in their space, an adult, that they're hoping their tantrum will help get that person to give them that thing that they want. Typically with tantrums, if we give them that thing that they want, they're going to calm down. That's the big difference here with dysregulation, is that kids oftentimes don't know what they need, they don't know what they want. They're distressed, they're confused, they're overwhelmed with all of these things coming at them in their life. And what happens then is that they're doing those same things that we often see in tantrums: hitting, kicking, screaming, falling on the floor, all of those things. But even if they're saying they want something, they really want that train, we give them that train and they're not calmed down. And we're like, well, I even gave you the thing that you want, and why didn't you calm down? It's really because they're in that state of dysregulation and not having a tantrum. So I think this is really important in classrooms, because it is sometimes hard when we have so many things going on and we're paying attention to so many things, to take the time to pause and understand that these kids really do need our help to co-regulate. They're not just bad kids or any of those other things that sometimes come up when we talk about kids who are having these outward behaviors. So then what can you do, right? So how do we help? So the first thing that I'd say is to check yourself. So with co-regulation, the most important thing is that you're regulated yourself. So if you've got a kid who is having a big moment of dysregulation, if they're safe and everyone's safe in the classroom, take a step out or a step back and regulate yourself. If you try to help that kid and your heart rate is racing or your breath is going very rapidly, that's going to impact how successful you are at regulating them. So if you've got that time, take that time. The next thing I think you should do is to check your environment. So with sensory stuff, we're all experiencing them differently. So sometimes you're like, we've got a vibe going in my classroom. They got nice music, the kids are playing, it's really nice in here, but the kid might be experiencing those same things in a different way that feels overwhelming. So if we look at our auditory system, what we're hearing, common things in classrooms are, think about free choice time. There's kids playing in all different kinds of ways. There might be splashing in a messy table. There might be, laughing over here and singing over there. We might have music playing. The door might be open where we can hear adults in the hallway, or we can hear kids in a gym nearby. Out the window, we might hear kids playing on a playground. All of those things could come together to be very overwhelming for a kid. So do a self-check of the auditory stuff in the room. Is there anything that you can minimize? Can we shut the door? Can we start cleaning up? Can we maybe turn off music? Sometimes that's, even though it's calming music, it might just be adding to kind of that overwhelm. So do a check of those things and kind of try to take yourself out of it and just think about what can be here in this environment. Same with visual stuff. So one of the things I think we don't think about is that clutter can be overwhelming for kids who are really sensitive to their visual input. So if we're having free choice time and this kid's really upset and dramatic play and there's toys everywhere, maybe we can just move some of that stuff out of that space where that kid is feeling this way so that they have less visual input happening. Maybe we can shut the door so we're not seeing people walk back and forth. Maybe we can shut the blinds so we're not seeing what's going on outside. There are also tools you can use with these things, like headphones for that auditory input, or sometimes like a white noise would be a little bit more calming for kids. But with any of these strategies, it's kind of trial and error, see what works for kids. One thing I like to do is provide sunglasses, which is usually fun for our littler kids, but it can also be kind of a level of we're minimizing our visual input because we're taking down some of that, the lights or what we're seeing, and it also gives them kind of a sense of I'm a step away from you. And sometimes, especially with this group of kids, that might make them feel a little more safe. I'm wearing these sunglasses, I'm sitting over here, I'm by myself. That might help them feel safe and comfortable, and then we're minimizing the sensory input, so that might help us get towards being more regulated. You can check smells. There's lots of smells that happen in little kid classrooms. If we can manage any of those, maybe we try to do that. And then one other thing I really want you to check on is, from what you can figure out, what's going on inside this kid's body. So are they hungry? Do they need to poop? Could they be constipated? Do they have a temperature? Think all of those things, because if we're really dysregulated, sometimes maybe they're feeling hangry, right? That's what we say. They're hungry and they're angry. And that's going to really impact how we can get through our day. Really what's happening inside of our body is also a sensory experience. So that could be playing off of everybody playing in the classroom. That's one of those things where it's like, oh, they're upset, but nothing happened. I don't know why. They're just like this. They're just doing that. Usually there is something, and a lot of times it's something sensory that we experience differently from them, so we don't know that that's what they're going through. And then after you check your environment, you can start trying these strategies. So I'm going to demonstrate them in the next clip, but what you really need to do with co-regulation is to ask for consent, especially with any kids who have experienced trauma. So I'll model this in the next video, but I really want it to be at the forefront of your thought, is that if kids are accepting of what we're offering, if they are open to trying the things that we offer them, we're going to have much more success with co-regulation than if they're, no, stay away from me, get away from me, they're falling on the floor and we're trying to force it on them. We're not likely to be very successful. So we want to be asking for consent in everything we do, and then we're going to watch for those verbal and nonverbal responses that they give us to see if they're accepting of it. So we know that, we've got babies in our classrooms, we've got kids who get really upset and they're not using any words. That's fine, let's watch the nonverbal. So if they say no, we'll respect it. If their body tells us no, we're also going to respect it. So if you see like those big eyes that are darting back and forth like deer in the headlights, that might be a sign that this strategy is not working. If we are super rigid body and we're trying to give them a strategy and they are just stiff and they're not calming down that reaction, then maybe that's not a strategy that they're ready for, they're accepting. If they run away, fall on the floor, turn away from you, flinch when you touch them, those are nonverbal signs that they are not ready or accepting of that co-regulation strategy. So I'll give you some other strategies also that we can use for those moments where these kids don't maybe want that hug that we're trying to give them. What else can we do? We'll go into that in the next clip.